Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In this video I'm going to be looking at Elizabeth's religious settlement again, and in particular this time I'm going to be looking at Catholic opposition to it. And this is Catholic opposition that runs all the way through Elizabeth's reign, and we'll be looking at how Elizabeth and her church and her government respond to this, and the degree of danger and the degree of threat that it holds. Now, to start off with, we need to remind ourselves of the settlement itself. So, as the Act of Supremacy, now there was opposition. There was opposition from one layman in the House of Lords, and also from the Marian bishops, and they felt unable to take the oath of supremacy because it took away authority from the Pope and it gave it to Elizabeth, and they didn't believe that was right. And again, this comes out of Catholic belief, and they were deprived of their posts because of this and thrown out of Elizabeth's church. Now, it is believed that around 2,000 members of the clergy took this same line and refused to swear the oath of the oath for the Act of Supremacy, and therefore lost their job. So we can see Catholic opposition from this is very substantial and likely to be quite influential on the English people, because these are priests and bishops who were refusing to take the oath, and because of the power of the church at this time, these are people that are likely to be respected and listened to by their parishioners. Now, the Act of Uniformity faced considerable struggle when getting through the House of Lords, where Catholic bishops were united in opposition, and again we then get them being joined by peers, and this time it wasn't one, it was 9, and so we've got real opposition here. Now, the Act passes 21 to 18, and that was only because several of the bishops were locked up in the Tower, and there were key figures such as the Abbot of Westminster and the Bishop of St Asaph, who were both absent. So getting the settlement in the first place was difficult, and a lot of this was because of Catholic opposition. Now, a lot of the writing about opposition to Elizabeth's settlement focuses on Protestant opposition, and you'll read about the Puritan choir in the Commons and things like that. But actually, in terms of opposition at the beginning that could actually have stopped it, it was Catholic opposition in the Lords that was important, rather than later perceived problems from Protestants in the House of Commons. And I will be looking at Protestant opposition in a separate video. Now, the church settles to a degree, and Elizabeth has her settlement in place, and there is opposition to it, but that opposition seems to be pushed aside. Now, why isn't there more of a push in the late 50s and then through the 1560s is often, I think, one of the big questions to do with Catholic opposition. And the reason really is well, there'd been lots of turmoil, and going against a monarch is a risky business. Are you going to go against a monarch and risk your life when there's a good chance that unmarried female monarch might not be around for a huge amount of extra time? And we see the crisis in 62 when Elizabeth is desperately ill with smallpox, and so she might not survive. That's one bit. The other bit is she might marry. Now, the earliest suitor for Elizabeth was Philip of Spain, who was Catholic, and therefore there was hope amongst Catholics in England that if Elizabeth finds herself a Catholic husband, then Catholicism might be restored, or at least restrictions on it removed. And so with all of this, there isn't actually a huge reason to push Catholic opposition early doors, and Elizabeth said, or supposed to have said, she didn't want a window into men's souls, and therefore she wasn't going to go prying too much into what was in people's hearts. And there were fines for not going to church, but for wealthy Catholics, that's something that they could cope with, and others would go and do the service, and they would then also take mass outside. I mean, there were priests who put themselves at great risk by delivering mass, but overall you could see that maybe the Catholic opposition was going to sit in wait and see how things developed. Now, the things started to change in 1567. The Pope instructs English Catholics not to attend Church of England services. So this balancing act with Elizabeth saying, well, you must come to mine, and then not really prying too much in what else happened. But that's going to become difficult for Catholics, because if they adhere to the teachings of the Pope, then they're not going to go at all. The Spanish Duke of Alba was sent to the Netherlands and was putting down a Protestant rebellion there. And this presence of these 10,000 Spanish troops just across the Channel from southeast England really raised fears that Spain might be intending to next invade England and force Catholicism back on the English people. If they were willing to do it in the Netherlands, then why not England as well? To make things worse, then not long after this, we see Mary, Queen of Scots, arriving in England, seeking sanctuary after losing her own throne to the Scottish lords. Now, not only was she Catholic, but she was next in line to the throne, and then so she becomes the focus point from this point onwards for Catholic opposition. And with this focal point, Catholic opposition really has the opportunity to grow and thrive. And linked to this, we get in 69, we get the Northern Rebellion. So leading Catholic nobles in the north, the Earl of Northumberland and the Earl of Westmoreland, decided to rebel against Elizabeth. Now, there are religious reasons for this, but there's a whole range of other things about it as well. It's worth having a look at some of my videos on Tudor rebellion, so have a bit of a look at this. So some of it's a courtly conspiracy because they thought they'd been slighted when given the power that they should have had in the north, and other kind of economic matters, but a lot of it is religion. And the plan was to marry Mary, Queen of Scots, having freed her, to the Duke of Norfolk, who was a Catholic figure, and again England's only Duke at the time, and Elizabeth's closest male relative. So this would help Mary, Queen of Scots, and particularly then their children, to be seen as the next in line to the English throne. And the idea was that Norfolk and Mary wouldn't go back up north, and they were going to take Scotland, and then they would be in a position to either challenge Elizabeth or to wait for Elizabeth to no longer be around, and then either them or their kids claim the throne. The leaders had been in touch with the Pope and Spain to try and secure some kind of foreign backing, and when they entered Durham Cathedral, they said Catholic Mass. They carried the banners of the 5 wounds of Christ, but they didn't gain a gigantic amount of support, and Elizabeth's army was able to defeat them. The rebel leaders fled north, and Elizabeth meted out justice to the north, and again really showed a kind of ruthless streak that her father would have been particularly proud of. This then leads on to the Excommunication of 1570. So Pope Pius V issued a papal bull which excommunicated Elizabeth, kicked her out of the church. Now, on one hand, you could kind of go, well, it's a Protestant queen who's been kicked out of the Catholic Church. What does she care? What difference does it make? Well, it did make a really significant difference, because what this meant was Elizabeth's Catholic subjects no longer had to obey her. Interesting, Pope Pius had not really got Philip's full support behind this. No, they hadn't really thought it through in terms of publication of the bull in England. Now, Philip had stopped the Pope doing this earlier, so he might not have had his full consent, but he hadn't been stopped from doing it as it had been done earlier. And again, as Elizabeth gets older, and we start to maybe see the chances of a marriage to a Habsburg chosen figure a kind of dwindling at this point, though there will, as we go into the 1570s, be a chance of a French marriage. Now, this led to the Act against bringing in and executing papal bulls and the Treason Act. So we see government taking very strong action against this. The Treason Act was based on Cromwell's Treason Act from 1534. And it became treasonable to say that the Queen was a heretic. I mean, she is the supreme governor of the church, and therefore what she says is kind of what the church is, rather than what the Pope says, because the Pope's no longer the head of the church in England. So we see the government is taking this threat really seriously, and potentially this could let loose all kinds of chaos in England. Not all the English people got to find out about it, however, because again, the Excommunication Bull was made. It was very difficult to get it published, and it was known about in certain circles. And some of these it did trickle in. I mean, the fact they're making laws against it suggests that it is a problem. And what we then start to see is a series of plots. The first is the Ridolfi Plot. So in 1571, Ridolfi was an Italian banker from Florence. He'd been involved in the Northern Rebellion, and he then had this new plan. He was going to get the Spanish to land in Essex. He was then going to march on London, overthrow Elizabeth, again the same old refrain, then marry Queen of Scots to Norfolk, who had kind of gone to the Queen on his knees and begged forgiveness following the Northern Rebellion. Had pulled out of the Northern Rebellion before it took full flow, and all this seems plausible. But Ridolfi, his messenger was caught at Dover. He cracked under torture, which is understandable because they were quite good at that kind of thing, and consequently Burleigh Cecil was able to put pressure on Elizabeth, and this then led to the execution of Norfolk, because this is twice. It's looked like there's a plan to marry him to Mary Queen of Scots and to put him as a challenge to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, however, would not execute Mary Queen of Scots at this point, much to the dismay of some of her councillors who thought, whilst Mary still lived, these plots would continue. And, well, they were right. Now, the next bit is the First Penal Law, and again, papal bulls into it, bring any papal bull into England was treasonable, amongst other things. So the First Penal Law was a kind of list of anti-Catholic laws, and because of the events of the late 1560s and 1570. Being Catholic now increasingly was being associated with treason, with foreign intervention, and being anti the monarch and anti-England. And so Elizabeth, who originally said she didn't want windows into men's souls, is now starting to see Catholics as the enemy, and she's very much been encouraged to that viewpoint by her council. Further attempts by Catholics to gain some kind of ground and foothold in England was seen in the 1570s, particularly after 1574. We see seminary priests who start to arrive in England, and there's 11 that arrived by 75. It's 100 by 1580, and the original impact of this is fairly limited. There was no real framework for them to operate in. They tended to end up in the large country houses of the Catholic nobility and Catholic gentry, and so they're not really going out to the people and trying to convert Protestants. They are talking to already adamant and converted Catholics. And if you go and visit some of the old manor houses across England, then you might find these hidden rooms and hidden chambers, these priest holes, where the priests were held, and you had priest catchers going out trying to catch them. It's all kind of very cloak and dagger kind of mystery and cat and mouse and all kinds of intriguing stuff like that. We also have the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, and they begin missions to England in 1580. And they were dedicated to re-Catholicizing England, and we see some key figures in this: Robert Parson, and in particular Edmund Campion, and they become the boogeyman. They are the threat, this idea that they're a real problem. And Campion was captured and then executed in 1581. There is a lot of historical debate about how significant all of this is. Again, the numbers don't look huge, do they? And we can dismiss it to a point that they're hiding in the priest holes in the gentry's houses and not doing much more. Now, John Bossy, who knows more about these kind of things than I do, argues that they ensured the survival of Catholicism, while Christopher Hay believes they were reduced to nothing more than a very minor role, kind of hiding in priest holes and just kind of confirming the beliefs amongst the elite of the English Catholics. We see the Second Penal Law, and this is an expository series of events, including the Jesuit missions, a rebellion in Ireland, and Philip II annexing Portugal, and Spanish threat is growing, and we're not a huge way off England and Spain going to war. So it was treason to withdraw a subject's allegiance to either the Queen or the Church of England, and it therefore was treasonable to be a Catholic priest. The fine for non-attendance, which had been very, very low, was now raised to the exorbitant fine of £20 a month. Saying Mass was punishable by a fine and imprisonment, and interestingly, there were more extreme stuff in there. That you can see the quite Protestant, almost Puritan in a lot of cases, council are really pushing Elizabeth to go all in on the anti-Catholic line, and she's a little bit reticent about it. She's not maybe got the same fervour for it as some of the rest of her government. Then the plots keep coming back, and we see Throckmorton Plot in 1583. And again, this is in the backdrop of the Catholic missions becoming more evident, and Protestantism in Europe was in a fairly precarious or dangerous position. There was the Counter-Reformation was in full flight. The plan was for the Duke of Guise to land in Sussex, and I hope that this would generate support from local Catholic nobles, for example, the Earl of Arundel. However, the conspiracy failed because Sir Francis Walsingham, Elizabeth's great spy master, had a mole in the French embassy. Throckmorton was taken in for questioning and was tortured, and he confessed, as people tend to do when Tudor torturers get hold of them, and then he was executed for treason. The key conspirator, however, wasn't really Throckmorton, it was Mendoza, the Spanish ambassador, so obviously they can't execute him, so they expel him from England. Arundel is imprisoned for his role, whether he'd agreed to it or not, but the fact that he was implicated. Mary, Queen of Scots, was moved to a more secure location, and security around here was tightened, as again the threat is very clearly there. In 1585, we see the acts against Jesuit and Seminary Priests, and again the Queen is now under the pressure from Privy Council, becoming even more paranoid about everything that's going on. The number of missionary priests had increased. 179 arrived in the 5 years 1580 to 1585. The international situation was really bad. William of Orange had been assassinated, and Dutch Protestants were being confined to the regions of Holland and Zeeland. And Philip had made an alliance with the Catholic League in France. So Protestantism in Europe and Protestantism in England were under major threat. And the acts against Jesuit and Seminary Priests made treasonable for any priest ordained under the Pope's authority to enter England. And those that were convicted and executed, and we see 123 priests being executed under this law in the years 1588 to 1592. So things are starting to get very, very serious. At this time, we get one of my favourite bits of this, which is is almost a bit like a kind of Tudor James Bond bit with spies and double agents and all kinds of exciting stuff. So William Parry was a Welsh gentleman, he was an MP, and he confessed to plotting to assassinate the Queen and replace her with Mary, Queen of Scots. The plot is very mysterious. Parry had worked for Cecil, for Lord Burleigh, as an agent spying on Catholic exiles. Now, was he converted by the Catholics and changed sides and therefore went back and said, I'm going to assassinate the Queen and put the Catholics back in charge? Or did he never actually seek to assassinate the Queen, but Burleigh wanted to get rid of him? Perhaps he hadn't proved to be particularly useful. Maybe they were worried about his position. Maybe they were trying to jolt Elizabeth into a bit more action against Mary, Queen of Scots, and go, look, they're plotting again. But the other explanation is he simply is a double agent. And again, so a great kind of Tudor mystery there, and the Parry Plot is a very interesting one that doesn't necessarily have an enormous kind of impact. The plot that does have the enormous impact is the Babington Plot in 1586. Babington was a young Catholic gentleman with close contacts with English priests in France and with Mendoza. Mendoza was aiming to launch a Spanish invasion into England and promote a Catholic uprising and assassinate the Queen and replace her with Mary Queen of Scots. So this is kind of very, very serious stuff. I mean, Babington is a bit of an idiot. He had been in service under Mary Queen of Scots, and it was said that he was in love with her, and him and his friends had pictures drawn and things at their meetings, and it was all very daft. So they say, right, we're going to kill the Queen in the name of Mary Queen of Scots. We should probably write to her and ask for her approval, which is a massive mistake, and particularly because the council are watching Mary Queen of Scots every move very, very carefully, and the letters that go through mainly through the barrel post, where there's the barrels of beer are delivered to where Mary was staying, and there's like a special thing inside the stopper of the bottle, the stopper of the barrel, which is sealed, which has got the letter in it, and then the letter in that is coded. But Thomas Phelps was intercepting and decoding the messages before they got to Mary, and then Mary was replying, and as Mary replied, they were decoding those letters as well. And essentially they waited and waited until she said something that particularly incriminated her into consenting to Elizabeth's assassination, so then they could go to Elizabeth and go, right, this is enough. And then there is a trial, and Mary denies the trial has any right to try her at all, and she stands up very bravely, but inevitably they find her guilty. Elizabeth holds off from executing her, and then she does consent, but then she changes her mind. But by the time she changes her mind, they run off with her, and Mary Queen of Scots is executed in 1587, and then in 1588 the Armada arrives. Or tries to. So we can see from this all particularly raises the position, and again that we then are in the context of full-blown war with Spain, and therefore Catholic equals Spanish and foreign, and treason and enemy of Elizabeth. So by 1603, at the time of Elizabeth's death, there was broad religious unity, in a way, by the Catholics becoming the opposition and associated with foreign powers and invasion. Being Catholic becomes something that most people don't want to do. Even those who are Catholic, again, it's country over all else, and they tended to, despite their faith, remain loyal to the crown. Popular Catholicism had declined, and one of the key things for Elizabeth is just time. So one of the problems with Edward and Mary had, and to a degree Henry VIII as well, is they made their religious changes and then they just weren't around for very long. Whilst for Elizabeth, she creates her church in 1559, she dies in 1603. So we are looking at what, 44 years. And 44 years, we're getting on for 2 generations, and so you've got people who have known nothing else than Elizabeth's church, and therefore the attachment to the old way of doing things wanes and starts to die off, and actually the attachment to the way that the church runs is an attachment to Elizabeth's church. So by 1603, we're down to about 10% of the population being Catholic sympathisers. Now, bear in mind, actually, probably around the time of Edward and Mary, it was well over 80, if not over 90%. And we've only got 2% who are active recusants who were refusing to go to church. And so, in a way, Elizabeth wins. She defeats this Catholic opposition to a large extent. Whether that's through policy or whether that's just through time, it is debatable. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please hit like. If you have any comments or questions, then please leave them below. If you haven't done so already, please do subscribe. There's loads of other Tudor videos on in my Tudor playlist, unsurprisingly, but there's lots of videos on other bits of history as well, on the American Civil War, on the Tsarist and Communist Russia, on modern Britain, and there's loads of politics stuff on here as well. So loads and loads of stuff that hopefully you'll find informative and entertaining to watch. A huge thank you to my colleague Fran from Thomas Rotherham, who helped put all the material together for this video and enabling me to go on and record it. So a huge thank you to Fran and her really important work behind all of this, and her continued brilliant teaching at Thomas Rotherham. So thank you very much everyone for watching, and again, big thank you to Fran.